In this video, I want to talk about a concept that could help you become more productive, finish more music, and reduce overthinking. As a creative, it's easy to feel sometimes that having more options is better. But more often than not, too many options leads to paralysis by analysis, which is the same reason why it's so easy to go to Netflix and scroll for hours without really finding anything you want to watch. We're faced with so many decisions that it's hard to even make one to begin with. And the same thing applies to creativity. So I want to show you a technique you can incorporate into your workflow that I call burning bridges. So when we're working on a project, it's very easy for us to want to keep our options open, say with these MIDI tracks here, so we can go back and tweak anything, change the MIDI, dial things in so it's just right. The thing is though, there's actually a lot of interesting studies that show that making commitment to decisions tends to lead to higher happiness and performance. But I don't think it's a long shot to draw the lines to creativity in music as well. I think people who commit to creative ideas and to parts of the creative process tend to have a higher output and a higher satisfaction with the work and a sense of creative fulfillment. And knowing that one of the biggest struggles people face right now as creatives is to actually finish tracks, I think a lot of it comes down to perfectionism and fear of commitment, as well as too many options. So let's have a look at one thing that we can do. Here's a really basic spiccato string line that we can work with. Let's quickly flesh this out using Composer Master Tools. Let's start with some of these whooshes. We'll use some of these rolls. Let's add some drums real quick. Let's do the classic cut. Quick brom. Okay, so what we often tend to do in this case, as we start building this, we tend to keep our options open in the sense that we keep this MIDI here in case we want to change it, in case we want to do something else. But one thing I want to try out now is to actually commit to something here. So one thing that happens when I commit to something I've done, one door tends to close. I can't go back and change the pattern or anything like that, but new doors tend to open, however cliche that saying is. So let's actually just freeze these tracks, and then we're gonna flatten them down to audio. There's no more ability to change these strings, but let's see what this forces us to actually do. Okay, let's go to beats, transients. That's kind of interesting when we go to EQ. Maybe a little bit of saturation. Valhalla. That's kind of interesting, but what happens if I commit again? So I can't really go back from this either. Let's freeze this as well, flatten it. Let's do some auto panning on it as well. Let's do something similar with this one. Let's go. Let's freeze this too, flatten it. Now we're starting to get something that is a lot more interesting than what we already had, not because I perfected it and left my options open in case I wanted to go back, but because I simply decided to fully commit and just see what lies on the other end of that commitment. And in this case, it forced me to kind of look at this audio file and be like, okay, what can I do with this? And I've ended up doing things that would be impossible for me to do with the original MIDI library that I started with. I can also try to take this down an octave as well. Take away the sustain, make it even snappier. See if I take it up an octave. Now listen to this compared to this. So that's just one example of how actually committing and not keeping my options open forced me to think creatively outside of the box and do something that was different. There's a few different ways to burn these bridges. One is to convert things into audio, like bouncing things down into audio like what I did right now. Another thing is to consolidate several things into one. This could be several tracks like this, or it could be several layers of a sound where you had all these different layers. Let's have a look at that as well. Let's open up the textures from one of my last YouTube videos, and let's just drag some of them in here. Maybe this one fades in. Maybe this one comes in later. So say I want to use this texture in a track. I don't really know how, but I want to use it. Keeping it like this gives me the flexibility later to mix the individual layers a bit more, but it also gives me a lot of these extra tracks to deal with. It also gives me in the back of my head another option that I could take. I could go back and change things. And I feel the more we eradicate these potential options back in time and actually making really set decisions that are more permanent, the easier it is to just navigate the creative process. So what I'm gonna do now, instead of using this to build a track, I'm gonna see what happens if I just consolidate this into one, and then we'll see what happens. So there's a few ways I could do this. I could bounce this out as audio, which would be a quick way, or I could in Ableton hit resampling here in this one. So I literally just play the texture, hit record, and will record anything that's playing right now. So I'm going to do that this time. So now I'm going to burn this bridge. This is my texture now. There's nothing else I can change. Now this is so much less cluttered and less intense to deal with and look at. And now that I'm here, I can do a lot of things I previously could not. For example, I could drag it over even into this previous idea here. And I could even do a similar effect to it with the transients. Make this fade in with the strings. Take it down an octave. See, I could use this as a similar texture, or I could actually take this whole shebang, I could add it into a sampler. And you hear how interesting these textures are. It's something I could never make consciously trying to make an instrument like this, but it just happens as a result of several happy accidents based on making commitments with no return. Those are just a couple of examples of how burning bridges actually helps you think more creatively and might actually help you propel forwards in the creative workflow a lot more than leaving all the options open and carrying all of this subconscious baggage of potential things you could do or could change. This is kind of like a mental spring cleaning for your creative workflow as you're working on a track. You're making things permanent and leaving no room for return, which actually frees you up more for what's ahead. So I hope that was helpful. Try out this technique in your next song, see if you can burn some bridges, and see where it takes you creatively, because it might take you some unexpected places. Hope that was helpful, and I'll see you in the next video.